Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. As Sally Spectra presents a fashion show for Billy Abbott, Victor Newman will use stolen riches proof to blackmail Kane Ashby, according to the Young and the Restless recap on Monday, August 25th. Victor will interrupt Kane's conversation with Lily Winters at Crimson Lights and insist on having a private conversation with him. Lily will assume they're done for the time being and will leave, but Kane will want to carry on their chat. Lily will run into Holden Novak in the park and voice her worries about him taking Kane's job offer. Holden and Damien Kane's friendship, which ended long before Damien traveled to Nice, will also be discussed. Holden is going to bring up Lily's attempt to hide her feelings for Kane, who is obviously still in love with her. Holden will deny knowing what Kane's main plan in Genoa City is, but Lily will be more interested in talking about it. Adam Newman will attempt to persuade Nick Newman that forming an alliance with Kane is not a good idea at the Newman Ranch. From Adam's perspective, Kane will never trust them, and he may still continue his plot in secret. Adam won't like the alliance even when Nick explains that it would only be a ploy and not be genuine. Adam will persuade Victor that it would be preferable to take on Kane directly and will entice Nick to join him. Nick, on the other hand, will foil Adam's scheme and advise them to have faith in Victor, who has been awaiting confirmation of certain facts. Nick will trust Victor to handle this and pretend that it has to do with a discovery he made at the chateau. Billy will talk to a private investigator on the phone at home during Monday's YNR episode, insisting that he wants to know Kane's every action. Billy will witness the private fashion show and select his favorite outfit from those that Sally models for the upcoming launch party. Following their time together on the couch, Sally and Billy will discuss Abbott communications and Sally's concern that she is in over her head. Before answering a call from his private investigator on Victor's rendezvous with Kane on his train, Billy will reassure Sally. Billy will pretend that everything is fine, but Sally will be concerned that Kane will discover that Billy is following him. Victor will in fact meet Kane on the train and make a suggestion regarding an offer that Kane won't be able to turn down. Victor will discuss Colin Atkinson's most recent big scam while presenting an envelope. Victor claims that Colin conned the wealthy old woman who owned the vineyard and chateau. A letter about the woman's last will and testament, which bequeathed everything to Colin's last alias, will be in the mail. Victor would see Colin's use of that cash to aid Kane as evidence that Kane's empire was founded on illicitly obtained funds. Victor will point out that Kane cannot demonstrate that he was unaware of the plot, despite his denials. If Kane doesn't assist him in fighting Jabot, Victor will run him out of town and threaten to reveal this information to the media. Victor will be happy that Kane sees things his way because Kane will consider the extortion and pretend that Victor has left him no other option. According to previews for the Young and the Restless, Kane might retaliate when Victor least expects it, so keep checking back for more information on potential vindictive actions. Throughout Genoa City, Victor had always been in charge. He understood when and how to pull the appropriate threads. Despite not being a Newman, Kane Ashby had nevertheless found himself in the merciless patriarch's sights. After numerous blunders, Kane had spent years attempting to repair his reputation, but Victor wasn't interested in atonement. Kane was seen by Victor as a pawn, a disposable instrument to be employed when the time was right. Victor's advantage over Kane was sufficient to cause even the proud Australian to let his guard down. Victor had stumbled upon a secret Kane thought was buried, and with that information, Victor cornered him, pushing him into an arrangement that Kane couldn't walk away from, no matter how much he wanted to. When Kane was summoned to Victor's office at Newman Enterprises, the pressure increased. The atmosphere seemed dense, as if Victor's might were supported by the walls themselves. Trying to hide the panic churning in his chest, Kane shifted uneasily in his chair across from him. Victor leaned back and said in a calm but steely tone, his dark eyes piercing. There was no need for him to yell. Kane wanted to resist, to remind Victor that he wasn't one of his kids who could be influenced by loyalty and fear, but the truth was that Victor had the evidence to destroy him. "You will do as I say, Kane, or everything you've worked so hard to rebuild will come crashing down in a matter of seconds." Kane's profession, reputation, and delicate personal life would all be destroyed by a single phone call or a single word to the proper person. Knowing he had no option but to nod his head in grudging agreement, Kane balled his fists beneath the desk. What made the blackmail even more terrible was the timing. Sally Spectra's fashion show, which had been billed as her big break and the night she would silence her detractors and demonstrate that she was more than just a fast-talking designer with a contentious background, had Genoa City humming with excitement. Sally had given the show her all, laboring through the night, and became fixated on the presentation, textiles, and stitching. She was aware that this was her chance to make an impression on Genoa City's corporate elite in addition to the fashion industry. Naturally, Victor was watching the event. He viewed Sally's presentation as a chessboard, and he was already positioning his pieces on it, rather than merely a runway. Unwillingly, Kane had joined them. Kane was caught between the reality of Victor's command and his wish to avoid becoming involved in Newman games. His task, which seemed straightforward on the surface but carried a hidden risk, was to make sure Sally's fashion presentation went precisely as Victor had intended. Victor hadn't been completely clear about whether that meant destroying a rival, exposing Sally's weaknesses, or guaranteeing Newman's supremacy in the fashion industry. He liked to leave Kane in the dark, allowing the doubt to consume him. Victor simply grinned and informed Kane, "You'll know when the time is right," each time he attempted to ask a question. Sally felt that something was wrong as the fashion show day drew nearer. There was an extra strain in the air this time, even though she had become accustomed to living with the weight of skepticism all around her. Backstage, she could feel eyes on her, whispers whispering that someone wanted her show to fail. Nevertheless, she persisted, resolved to create a memorable evening for Genoa City. Her designs were unabashedly Sally, audacious, and bold. She wanted people to realize that she wasn't scared to take chances by gasping when the models walked the runway. She wanted her genius to be acknowledged by the Abbotts, the Newmans, and all the other influential people seated in those chairs. Kane, on the other hand, battled his conscience. Despite Victor's explicit orders to handle things, he couldn't shake the thought of harming Sally. He understood what it was like to live with the shadow of mistakes you couldn't undo and to have people distrust you all the time. Kane couldn't help but think that perhaps Victor had overestimated her fire as he watched her stress over the little things and shout out last-minute changes to her crew. Victor, however, was more concerned with control and expected Kane to provide it than he was with Sally's fervor or fortitude. The venue glistened with riches and power on the night of the performance. From the Abbotts to the Newmans, Genoa City's aristocracy occupied the front rows, each with a distinct goal in mind. Kane stayed on the sidelines, observing everything with a mixture of anticipation and fear, while Sally paced backstage, her heart racing. Knowing that Kane was under his control, Victor sat composedly in the audience, his keen eyes scanning the space. Every look Victor gave him served as a reminder that he was on a leash. There was a stunned stillness in the room as the lights went down and the first model appeared on the runway. Each item was bolder than the last, the colors were vivid, and the cuts were daring but elegant as Sally's vision came to life. Even those in the audience who had questioned her talent started to buzz with admiration. Even though he knew he had no right to, Kane experienced an odd wave of pride for Sally. His directives there had the potential to ruin everything she had worked so hard to achieve. The guilt increased with each minute that went by. Kane encountered the moment of truth halfway through the performance. Victor's planning gave him the chance to sow the seeds of disarray. To reveal what seemed to be a stolen design in Sally's collection, a competing designer had been smuggled into the crowd. The controversy was poised to explode at any moment, and the scenario was perfect. Kane only needed to make the signal. As he looked from Sally, whose eyes gleamed with anxious resolve, to Victor, whose calm gaze demanded compliance, his palms began to perspire. Kane was afraid that people may hear how loudly his heart was beating. Kane hesitated in that moment. He reflected on his kids and the innumerable occasions that his errors had cost him their admiration. When his own falsehoods caught up with him, he reflected on the humiliation he had experienced. And he imagined Sally, standing there so confident, taking charge of her own story at last. Using all of his strength, Kane decided not to destroy her. Keeping his hands folded firmly, he forced himself to stay still rather than give the rival designer a signal. Victor took note. He saw, of course. His jaw tightened in mute rage as his face hardened. He had anticipated that Kane would fulfill his duty and eventually follow suit, just like everyone else who had defied him. Kane, however, had subtly but consciously disobeyed him. The remainder of the event went on without any problems, and Sally had won by the time the last model walked the runway to roaring cheers. Photographers flashed their cameras as the audience stood in acclaim, and Sally's face brightened with pleasure and satisfaction at having at last shown her value. But Kane knew that he wouldn't be able to enjoy the party. He knew what was going to happen the moment he met Victor's eyes across the room. Disobedience was not forgiven by Victor. Kane believed that the strain he was about to face was nothing like what he had experienced in the past. Kane had just begun a silent war with the most dangerous guy in Genoa City, but Sally could have won the night. Calm and composed, Victor merely smiled at Kane, promising that their next talk would be far darker than the one that had initiated the whole situation. The event where Victor Newman, a titan of industry and a master of strategic manipulation, successfully blackmails his own son, Kane Ashby, on the eve of a crucial fashion show hosted by Sally Spectra, is one of the most gripping and darkly illustrative scenes in the complex dance of power, ambition, and moral compromise within the fictional world of Genoa City. This incident is a concentrated outburst of long-simmering tensions, personal histories, and character-defining defects rather than a standalone occurrence. Analyzing it would be like dissecting a complex ecosystem of interpersonal dynamics, where a business event serves as the setting for a devastating personal betrayal and a brutal display of paternal authority. This would expose the destructive nature of secrets and the extent people will go to in order to defend their manufactured realities. The basis of this clash is built upon the fragile ground of Kane Ashby's identity. Kane had been living a lie for years, pretending to be the actual Kane Ashby, who had been killed in a car accident. His entire life in Genoa City, including his marriage to Lily Winters, his place in the influential Chancellor family, and his reputation in the corporate world, was based on this basic dishonesty. Even though this specific falsehood had already been revealed and supposedly accepted, it left him permanently vulnerable, a gap in his armor that could be readily exploited by someone as shrewd and cunning as Victor Newman. In Victor's view, it created a pattern of behavior for Kane that involved using deceit to protect himself, making him both a target and a predictable player. The shifting allegiances within his own family and his rivalry with other corporate groups frequently test Victor's position of tremendous power, as the patriarch whose own history is a tapestry of brutal actions and moral difficulties. His motivation in this situation is complex and stems from a poisonous combination of control, protectionism, and a distorted perception of what is best for his family, especially his daughter Victoria. The direct cause was Victoria Newman's friendship with Kane. Their cooperation at Newman Enterprises, or perhaps more appropriately, their affair, was a subject of severe strife and humiliation for Victor. In addition to being an inept businessman, he saw Kane as a philandering distraction who was steering his daughter and, consequently, his business, into scandal and collapse. Victor's major purpose was always the removal of Kane from Victoria's professional and personal life. Direct interference had not worked, though, and Victoria had spoken up for Kane and their business choices in an effort to show her independence. Victor found himself in a situation where traditional paternal or corporate authority was useless. Kane's past gave him plenty of leverage, which he needed. The fashion show itself, staged by the ambitious and skilled Sally Spectra, acts as the perfect pressure point. Any controversy surrounding it would be both personally and professionally disastrous because it is a highly public event in which Victoria's firm has a stake. Victor is aware that success and failure are magnified on a public stage, and he uses this opportunity to exert as much pressure as possible. The blackmail mechanism is a masterful example of psychological manipulation. Victor does not need to find a new, earth-shattering truth, he merely resurrects an old one, illustrating that in the world of Genoa City, the past is never truly dead. He addresses Kane in private, most likely in the commanding environment of his office, which is intended to terrify and strengthen his authority. He gives Kane a deadline: quit Newman Enterprises, cut off all contact with Victoria, and leave town, or Victor would divulge a secret that will ruin Kane's life. The pain of the blackmail lies in the particulars of this secret. Not only was his identity theft repeated, but it was something even more heinous and damaging. It was discovered that Kane had a daughter from a past relationship, a child whose existence he had never told his wife, Lily. It would be disastrous to learn this. It would destabilize his family, destroy the trust he had laboriously restored with Lily following his prior deceptions, and portray him as not just a liar but also a negligent and absent father. Victor, a man who values family tremendously and frequently in a hypocritical manner, uses this idea as a weapon against his kid. Victor's move is both brilliant and horrifying because it was a forced decision. Kane is given two infuriating options. He could, on the one hand, give up his life in Genoa City, his career, his influential position, and his connection with Victoria. This is a huge personal and professional setback and a great embarrassment. However, he can choose to resist Victor and risk having his marriage and his status as a family guy completely destroyed. There are two types of ruin to choose from. Victor makes Kane decide which life to sacrifice and makes him the instrument of his own demise. Victor just revealing the secret himself is not nearly as effective as this. Victor accomplishes his objective of getting rid of Kane while keeping the scandal under control by forcing him to resign and vanish. One can spin a sudden, enigmatic resignation in a variety of ways. A complex controversy that could potentially affect Victoria and Newman Enterprises is created by a public outburst of infidelity and secret love children. Victor achieves a neat and effective outcome and implicates Kane in the cover-up. Kane's choice to cooperate demonstrates his character's primary driving force, which is to maintain his relationship with Lily and his kids at any costs. Every other sacrifice, his work, his pride, his affair, his city, becomes bearable when he faces the possibility of losing them permanently. Right now, he is putting his family first, but he is doing so by engaging in yet another serious act of dishonesty. He cannot explain his sudden departure to Lily honestly without provoking the very calamity he is attempting to avoid. He must thus create a new lie, a new story to justify his sudden departure, solidifying the pattern of dishonesty that characterizes him. His participation is a desperate attempt to limit the harm that highlights his vulnerability in the face of Victor's enormous might. It is not an act of salvation. He is totally outplayed. Sally's fashion show's setting raises the stakes and adds a layer of dramatic irony. The purpose of the gathering is to highlight the company's success and to celebrate Sally's inventiveness. It is a world of glitz, beauty, and public opinion, which stands in stark contrast to the obscene, personal intrigue that goes on behind the scenes. Under the sword of Damocles, Kane is spending his last hours in Genoa while models walk the runway and guests marvel at the creations. His forced performance is reflected in the public spectacle of the play, which keeps up a facade of normalcy while his world falls apart. He is lying with every celebratory handshake and phony smile. A motif that runs across all of these people's lives is the sharp contrast between their private and public selves, which is highlighted by the fashion show's transformation into a prison of deception. All of the characters are impacted by the fallout from this blackmail. It's a tactical win for Victor. He thinks he has safeguarded his daughter and his business when he successfully removes Kane from the Newman environment. His reputation as the brilliant strategist who would do whatever is necessary to maintain his empire, even if it means sacrificing one family to secure his own, is strengthened by this. But it also makes his own family's divisions worse. Victoria will probably be incensed at her father's meddling when the truth eventually comes to light, as it always does in Genoa City, because she will perceive it as a breach of her autonomy rather than a form of protection. It adds yet another log to the smoldering, intricate history of their father-daughter bond, which is based on affection, respect, animosity, and a never-ending power struggle. The repercussions are severe and swift for Cain. He is in exile because of his leaving. He loses everything he has worked so hard to achieve, including his home, his job, and his formidable boyfriend. Most agonizingly, though, he lives in continual worry that Victor might still divulge his secret at any time. His survival is dependent upon Victor's ongoing satisfaction, making him a constant exile from the truth. His decision to leave in order to protect his family ultimately hurts them because Lily and his kids experience grief and mystery as a result of his absence. At their table, the blackmail's secret and the cause of his flight turn into a ghost, causing a rift and a lack of closure that is extremely harmful. At first, Lily is devastated and confused by her husband's abrupt and unexplained departure. Her life is turned upside down by a battle she has no knowledge of, and she is an innocent victim of this confrontation between Victor and Cain. She must pick herself up and continue to be a single mother while dealing with an inexplicable pain after her trust is broken a second time. She endures the repercussions of a secret she chose not to keep, which is arguably the most brutal part of the blackmail's aftermath. Lastly, this drama unintentionally takes over the fashion presentation for Sally's Spectra. Although her professional period in the spotlight should have been about her talent, the personal tragedy that took place in its shadow has permanently tarnished it. The occasion becomes connected not with her designs, but with Cain's unexpected disappearance and the accompanying talk. As a reminder that in the high-stakes world of Genoa City, personal goals are frequently overshadowed by the greater conflicts between legacy families, she ends up as a collateral casualty in a war she wasn't fighting. In conclusion, the power dynamics that characterize their environment are exemplified by Victor's blackmail of Cain on the eve of Sally's fashion show. It is an act in which personal morality, family, and business get perilously entangled. Victor sacrifices his son's welfare for what he believes to be the greater good of his empire and his lineage by using a harsh, utilitarian logic. Constrained by the results of his previous decisions, Cain is reduced to a pawn and must decide how to be executed. The ironic setting for this incredibly repulsive transaction is the fashion show, which is a representation of aspiration and superficial beauty. The fundamental realities of these characters are exposed by this incident: Victoria's blind spot for the men in her life, Cain's self-serving yet family-focused desperation, Lily's terrible susceptibility to other people's deceit, and Victor's brutal dominance. It serves as a sobering reminder that truth, trust, and the very families that these acts are meant to protect are frequently the most devastating casualties in the fight for power and image protection.